Good afternoon. The Public Safety Committee will come to order. We're very pleased to see our chiefs here, police and fire. And we also have our city manager, and we have our assistants, and we have our attorneys, and of course our city secretary, and also Ms. Kelly. The Public Safety Committee invites citizens' participation. We do not have anyone on the sign-up sheet, is that correct? Thank you. What are we going to do?
C1, please.
All right, C1. Any other from the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the balance.
Second.
It's been properly moved to approve the balance. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Item C1, ordinance amending Chapter 38 of the City Code entitled Miscellaneous Offenses and Provisions.
Mr. Assistant Chairman Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam City Attorney, we do know the General Assembly recently amended the gun laws, now allowing guns on school property, and this is what this item is about. Tell us a little bit about what the current law is from the General Assembly and what item C1 is asking of us as a Public Safety Committee.
As the law exists at the present time, guns are allowed on school property if they are in a locked vehicle, in a locked compartment. Our current ordinance prohibits guns altogether on school property. And because of the change in the law, our ordinance basically is unenforceable, it's obsolete. And so this particular item will remove from the city code references to guns on school property since state law trumps the city code.
Thank you.
Yes. Would the Public Safety Attorney like to offer any comments concerning this item?
That's exactly the reasoning and the purpose behind the resolution.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Does the law prohibit the county or the school board from prohibiting guns any further on the property itself?
There's been some discussion about that. I know between the School of Government and the county attorney and school board attorneys. It's my understanding that the law does prohibit them, the school system, from adopting a separate regulation prohibiting guns contrary to the statute. But I know that's something that the school board attorneys and the General Assembly and the School of Government have been in much discussion about.
And so we kind of think they can't. It's pretty much.
That's the last word that I heard, but
So-
that's not something that I've been, kept abreast of since we don't regulate the school system. So.
Right, and the only reason I ask that is that if this passes, that it will be my request, which I think you are already in conversation with them, to, if it's the desire of the school board or of the county, if they would like to keep some type of restriction in, which I'm not sure likely if that's something they would desire to do, but at least that they understand what this means for them on that property.
Correct, okay.
All right, thank you.
And thank you, Madam City Attorney. That's part of the reason why I brought this up, just as an informational for those who may be watching or who may be in the audience to understand what the new law is. I don't know how much information and education is going out, but it may be something that we might want to add, Mr. City Managers, to our TV 13 channels and to as many, I don't know, rec centers and places where the city asks our kids to go. I have problems with this. I do understand that it's state law, but given what has happened nationally with Sandy Hook and several other school shootings, I just do not like the idea of us allowing guns to come around where we're asking our children to play or where we're asking our children to be educated. As the father of 3 in the school system, I just don't like the idea of knowing that there are guns, whether they be locked or unlocked, in parking lots, which could be harmful to children. And I do understand why the regulation was passed as a protection measure, but that's defense. But there is a thing called offense, and guns can be used for offense as well. And I don't have a problem with guns. It's just certain owners who may not have the mental capacity to be able to do what the state law is asking us to do. So with that being said, I will not make a motion. And I don't know if Councilman Montgomery may want to make the motion, but I will abstain at this time.
All right. The city manager and I have been in communication about just what you're talking about. There are some things we as a city can have control, and some things we cannot. I believe Chief Roundtree and some other chiefs, we're going to be coming together, and we're going to have discussions like we're having. Whether we may have the vote to do it, we can make certain observations and recommendations to let our taxpayers know how we stand and how concerned we are about their safety. And it's not a personal something with any of us. We just want us to be communicating, understanding the city's standpoint.
Yeah.
And that will be coming soon, won't it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Any other comments?
Not at this time.
All right, so it appears that we have, this will go to the full without any recommendation.
Right.
Thank you, Attorney. Now we will go to our general agenda. Madam Secretary.
Item G1, consideration of items related to the proposed gun buyback concept. A, ordinance amending the annual appropriation and tax levy for the fiscal year 2013-14, and B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Chief Roundtree.
Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good. What we're proposing is a community gun buyback program. Again, as we discussed in the last committee, this is not going to be a magic solution to curbing gun violence. But the gun buyback initiative is only a small part of an overall comprehensive strategy that the police department is presently working on. Presently, we are working with community partners, we're working with prosecutors, and we're also working with other law enforcement agencies to reduce gun violence in our communities. When I say we're working with these partners, we're working with the United States Attorney's Office through the Middle District and the Violent Crimes Task Force. We're working with our local district attorney's office in the Chronic Offenders Program, and we're also working with several community safety partners to reduce gun violence. And this is not only through enforcement, but it's also through educating our citizens on the proper use and on the proper use of guns. To be successful, we do feel that it would take about $10,000 to fund a gun buyback program. In addition to monies provided by the city, we are proposing that we raise funds in the community, and also we do have the possibility of using our existing forfeiture funds to fund this project if it's something that that council approves. This proposal is not designed to restrict anyone's legal right for owning guns or purchasing guns, but it is a way that we can remove guns off the streets to make our community safe for everyone to live in. You know, if one person chooses to turn in a weapon that they no longer want, or they feel that it's not safe for them to own, I do think that will be a win for this community. I'm open to your suggestions and open to hear what you have, any ideas that you may have to see how this proposal and concept could work or look differently.
All right, committee, and then starting with you.
Well, as I mentioned in the Finance Committee meeting, particularly when we look at gun violence and in the city of Winston-Salem over this year, and I have not been ambiguous in my conversation with the city manager and the chief with my concern about the rise of gun violence. And even so much so in terms of looking at the numbers, specifically looking in the East Ward and looking at those numbers, but it's a citywide issue. And I think that this is just one piece of that puzzle that we have to put together. But I think it's working in conjunction with our community partners and some that may not currently be partners to begin real conversations, whether it's looking at religious institutions in this community, going in the areas where not just the gun violence is happening, but the individuals who are perpetrating the gun violence, where are they coming from? Because it's not always where the gun violence happens. Those individuals are not always living in those communities. So we have to really connect the dots because when people begin to think that it's okay to use a gun outside of real self-defense, that's where the problem lies. And I think that we're in a place right now of a slippery slope that I don't think that anybody in the city wants us to go down. And I think if we can use this as a rallying point to pull some of those people together to begin that real citywide conversation. I think it's something that could bode well for us overall, and I think that's some things that we need to continue to look forward on.
Exactly.
Very good. Yes.
I think Councilman Montgomery hit it spot on. I think item C1 that we just discussed and item G1 are closely related. And we don't want any gun violence in our schools, in our neighborhoods, or anywhere that we live, work, and relax. And I don't think there's any one magic bullet to get the guns off the street or to prevent gun violence in our schools and our neighborhoods. But I think that, all of us as a council, what we're doing is we're organizing neighborhoods and communities and pulling residents together and forming neighborhood groups and associations. We're looking at, as a council, potentially decentralizing the Public Safety Center. And Chief, I know this is something that you've been interested in as well, getting police districts in communities, helping to reduce those crimes, and looking at things like the gun buyback program. I think it's a good idea. This is something that I will support. I just have 2 questions, or maybe one information and one question that I mentioned in the last session. First of all, Chief, I know that you've done some really good things in your position before you were Chief with looking at, forfeiture funds. I know they've been used to help, the Juvenile Drug Treatment Court, and they've been used for the right reasons in this community. I'd like to get a fund balance on where we are with the forfeiture fund. Well, I understand what we do with them, but tell me about the process for how we go about forfeiture funds. Once funds are seized from drug dealers and from properties from drug sales, what happens to that money? I know a portion goes to the federal government, a portion stays with us. Walk us through that really quick, and I'll ask my second one, please.
Okay. Well, there's 2 different processes. There's a federal forfeiture and then there's a state forfeiture. On federal forfeitures, once the case is adopted as a federal case, whatever proceeds are gained from that particular case, the government keeps 20% as a processing fee, and the investigating agency or agencies have the remaining 80%. For example, if we do an operation with another agency and most of the work is about equal, the 2 agencies working together will split the 80%, and the federal government still keeps 20%. Now, there's also a process, state forfeiture. That process is just slightly different. It works pretty much the same way, whether it's for vehicles, cash money, property. The state keeps 25%, and the investigating agency or agencies keep 75%.
Well, I think that's good information for the public to know. And as I mentioned, if you would just give us, or at some point in time, maybe not now, but some point in time in the future, where we are with the fund balance and the good things that we're using the monies for once we get the drug dealers and the monies off the streets. Secondly, I talked a little bit about in the last committee about how this proposal talks about where the gun buyback will be. It appears that the gun buyback will be in a designated community location that we don't know of right now. One thing that I will ask is that we look at, I know Councilman Montgomery mentioned the east, the southeast, we've got the northeast, and we've got the north wards here. I can say we have had some violence in the southeast ward. So it appears that we don't need to have one centralized location where people are able to come and sell their guns back to the city. Maybe we can look at some satellite locations where everybody in the communities that have been plagued with this violence can come and sell back their guns, and we can work individually to get these guns off the street.
Okay. I'm open to that. That's actually, that's what one of the cities here in the state did. They had 3 different locations. They actually used 3 churches to hold that gun buyback program.
And I think that was suggested earlier, too. Did you want to speak?
Yes, Chief, I know that, like you said, part of the process of this issue that we have is that we're talking to each other. I think talking is great, because I like to talk. But I would love to see us do a deep dive, as other cities have done, like Detroit. What is driving our violence here, gun violence? You know, whether it be juveniles, whether it be nobody's at home, whether it's gangs, whether it's drugs. I think we now as a city are at the point where we need to understand what's driving the violence now. Is it a one-on-one thing that people don't know how to deal with conflict resolution? I think that would be helpful, again, later when we get some of the parties and partners to the table, that they're able to see possibly what's driving our violence, and then we can address it with the churches and community organizations and partners, juvenile justice, boys club, whatever. Now we can pull some people to the table and say, you know, we'd like you to plug in this piece. You're probably doing it, but we now need to plug in this piece to help your customers and clients understand that they can help this situation to not occur.
Also, I believe Mr. Page will tell you with the gangs, we're plugging some of those people right in. And one thing that I see as a weakness, when we have units where you have a lot of folks living, and we're working on that too, where we have a gang coordinator and we have a person who's supposed to be outreach. What's her title? What's her latest?
She's community relations.
Community relations.
All right, then it's nice to sit around in meetings, as I've said to the city manager, but let's use their time where they start talking to these people to bring what you're talking about, these different people to the table, work with these young folks in these multi-units so that we can know, and with the people who manage them, because we are having a rise on crime, and in some areas more than ever. And we're finding it where people do not have the attention from their parents, so we know that. So it's not going to be at a period. So there are certain things that we can do that we will bring these people together. And I hope that Mr. Page, I did get a report on how we're working through Ms. Joyner and Mr. Solomon in trying to bring different folks to the table to try to solve these problems, and not a lot of words. Now, I want to speak about this forfeited money. We're not enforcing it. That's one thing we're not doing. We're not enforcing some of the things we could be doing with these drug people. We have people with units, and every day they're selling the drugs. I'm not going to call any names because I don't want nobody to bump me off. They may think I know something. I don't want, but we pass it every day. And we see them just having a grand time. And then we see our Winston-Salem police, not to be critical, but they drive right by where we know they're doing that. And I have said that I think that what we need to do, Chief Roundtree, we need to make sure we enforce it. We send letters to these owners, but we send little letters where we pet them. We need to have strong letters going to them, but when we tell them, you know, you have drugs in that area and there are certain things we can do. We can take their whole units. We can take them. And then I think you also need to talk about the role of the school system with this kind of money. Don't they get some of that drug money?
For certain offenses and certain crimes, by statute, some of those monies do go to the school system. Now these particular forfeiture funds are designated for law enforcement purposes, but there are certain crimes, like for certain traffic offenses and some lower level of drug offenses, those funds are turned over to the school system.
Yeah, and I think we next time need to just, how much money goes for that and how much we actually. Thank you. Yes.
And sort of comment on it, then I know in terms of looking at some locations, I think that'd be real good to look at, but also in making the environment non-intimidating.
Right.
I think that's just something to keep in mind, to think about when individuals come. You may have some who just come just because it's an opportunity to bring it in there. They know it's a good thing to do, but then others may feel some reluctancy. And how do we create an environment that is going to be non-intimidating for the individual who wants to, but you know, they don't want to feel intimidated coming as well. So I think that's something interesting to take a look at.
When you say environment, explain that individual who wants to and those who, and then city manager, you can.
Well, I'm saying in terms of intimidated, it'd be intimidating to somebody who wants to come and turn in a gun. I don't think we should do it. Yeah, I'm talking about the gun. I said if you did it at the police station, which I don't think you should do, that may not be the best place.
Right.
Same thing if somebody wants to come and do a complaint, sometimes that may be intimidating for them. So I think if we look at places and the environment to be non-intimidating, where it's just a more relaxed role, and as you said, churches or those, wherever it is that we can find those locations to be an area that, you know, would lend itself to that comfort.
I agree.
Yeah, and city manager, before you start, when a question was asked, if you have a gun and that's a stolen gun, then a gun that has committed some type of crime, well, suppose I just had that gun and I gave the gun up, but I was not the criminal. How do I keep me from feeling intimidated about it?
Well, that's one of the things that we've been in discussions with our local district attorney. That will be something that we will have to work out from a legal standpoint. Now, of course, that gun was found to be, well, we ran the serial numbers and then stolen from California, for example. You know, of course, we couldn't prove that that person who turned it in actually stole it, but the person actually was in possession of it at the time when the gun was turned in. So that's something that we would have to work out as far as how we would go about handling that situation.
That's what to keep him from filling that out. I can't participate because I'm afraid that I would be in trouble. City Manager?
Thank you, Chairman Burke. I wanted to point out something that the city attorney and I have been talking about, specifically related to nuisance abatement, criminal nuisance abatement, where you actually seize somebody's property. We've been talking about being more aggressive about that, past what the police department does with the letters. It takes quite a bit of legal research and action, and if this council's interested in that, we probably need to talk about some additional staff in the attorney's office, somebody who would just do that, to go after, whether it's commercial or residential, go after the owner of that property. Police department can tell you, they can give you the names of the locations that they go to day in, day after day.
I think that that is something that we need to consider, because if we don't have someone that's going to give it attention and it's not strong enough, then it's like having something on the book not being enforced. I'm just one, but that is something that I hope
We will-
that
we
this
will-
committee
we
can
will
make
look at
some
it.
type
I
of-
agree.
Yes.
I think that's exactly what I was going to mention. You know, we will not tolerate
No,
crime,
No.
drug dealing, and gun violence in this city.
absolutely.
We won't tolerate it in the Southeast Ward and every other ward. Mr. City Manager, I'm definitely
right.
buying into it wholeheartedly.
That's right.
If there is a absentee landlord who doesn't want to fix up his or her property, we're going to go after that person, and we're going to get them out of our community. If there is a drug house who refuses to shut down, and they continue, you know, I've seen drug houses, the police bust them, they're back in business next week. The police bust them, they go through the court system, they're back in business next week. That doesn't say anything about our law enforcement. That says that there need to be stiffer penalties for certain crimes, habitual crimes, on the municipal court level. But we have no bearing over that. But here's what we can do. We can continue to build our coffers, and I'm okay with doing it for money.
That's
If
right.
you want to continue to allow drug dealers in your home, we will take your home.
That's right.
And we will sell it, and we will use it for economic development.
That's right.
In this city, and particularly in the Southeast Ward. And I take that stand, and I don't care who writes it or says anything about it.
That's
I'm not going to tolerate it. Chief, you tell them we're not going to tolerate it.
Well, I have said that to the city manager, because really it's wasting time. People come to work every day and they don't get anything, the results. But why send them back and forth in the same old, same old? And I said clearly to the city manager, I think all sections of our city should look livable and should be safe looking. It should be clean, and we should not tolerate drugs in one area just overpowering because you have certain kinds of landlords that refuse to do right.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, Councilmember Burke and Councilmember Taylor, and I'm sure Councilmember Montgomery will too. It is just very disheartening, again, as the chief knows, when your constituents call you, and we all know where the major spots are in our wards, we know. And it's like our law enforcement can only go there, you know, knock on the door, maybe make an arrest, but then, like you said, the next day, they're back at it again. I am wholeheartedly about that. I remember on the Housing Authority, we had a store, and most of you probably remember it, on Glen Avenue. And we went after that store because it was known to distribute. And we took it. And we made a community center out of it before Hope 6. I believe that anybody that wants to continue to do crime in our city, if we're going to be the city of innovation and arts, and we're going to be the place where baby boomers want to come and live, and young people, and with their children and families, we got to take a stand somewhere. And I agree, what better way than to take somebody's property, sell it, make some money, and reinvest it back into the community? I think it's a great idea.
Councilperson.
But I don't disagree with anything that's been stated. I think that we, again, have to look at all the opportunities for us to continue to hold individuals accountable. I know one thing that I look for on a monthly basis in the East Ward is the crime. And as well as that, I get the numbers on those drug-related crimes in the area, and oftentimes you do see some recurring areas, and it shows the fact that police is there. It shows the fact that they've come and they've made arrests, that the police are out, that they're in these areas. But for our citizens who live in the community, it to them, having an officer come out and make arrests, as Councilmember Taylor said, but they live across the street from the same place that continues to be a problem. To them, it doesn't matter that they've come that one time and made the arrest, but it continues to be that problem that we have. And so I think that there's some things there that we can continue to make our citizens feel comfortable when they know that we're taking these type of actions.
Just like the Winston-Salem Police Department spent quite a few hours at a site. And they were there talking with the people. But when they left, they back again doing the same thing. And I think we won't call this place, but it was like every Monday for so many Mondays, our police just mingling around with them, and people saw them there. But then they said, oh, but after they left, they started doing the same old thing. So that's what we will have to keep in mind.
Final.
Yes.
Madam City Attorney, if there is not a protocol in place, please let me know. But either you can tell us now or later, but I'd be interested to know what the protocol is for nuisance abatement. And I know in other areas, we've looked at it in other businesses, but for personal and private property, if there's not a policy in place, let's put it in place. If there is one, make sure you get that to us. And we want to make sure that the property owners are properly notified. Now, we don't want to take someone's property and they didn't know anything about it, they live in Florida. We want to make sure they know. And I don't know if it's 3 times you out, whatever the case may be, but obviously, you've got 3 communities east of 52, 1 west of 52. We've got the same problem. We want to look at, it sounds to me like there is consensus built here to move forward with nuisance abatement for personal private property.
We'll be happy to get that information to all the council members.
Yes, and make sure if it needs more discussion, let it go through the general
Yes.
committee, community development, housing, so they can really do a thorough job of what we're talking about. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other comments concerning this G1?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been properly moved in second. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Now, were we talking about A and B?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Just for the record, we move approval for C1A and B.
Right.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item
Thank you.
B2, information on ladder truck replacement alternative.
Excuse me, thank you, Chief Roundtree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
I'd like to say good afternoon to the Community Committee Chair, council members, and management. Today, Fire is presenting an alternative for you in lieu of purchasing a ladder truck that's basically in the budget to be replaced this year.
Yeah. You know what we were going to say, Fire Chief Farmer?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we need, we just saw that not too long ago.
Have discussion about it?
Yeah, so I know we had some discussion during the Finance Committee meeting. Just wanted to talk to you briefly. This won't take about 5 minutes for the presentation. Then I have with me today Chief Carter and Chief Langland, both are assistant chiefs, and they're here to sort of help answer some of the questions you may have in lieu of
All
this
right,
item.
thank you, Chief.
So if I can be very quick and brief, you heard earlier where we're simply looking at replacing a ladder truck by the vendor or the manufacturer that simply can rebuild this truck using the ladder and giving us a new chassis and body. And that's a 98 truck that will cost about $1.2 million to replace. And basically, when we replace that, it will cost us roughly $700,000 and versus paying $1.2 million. And so certainly that's a savings we feel will be in the range of $500,000. And so what we're basically advocating or recommending is that we reallocate those savings to help us purchase some modules that can be utilized for some needed training that we're having right here locally. Now, I know Mr. Clark asked a question earlier about the training center that's up in King. Now, the King Training Center has a completely different scope in terms of what it offers. It's a community college And obviously, it offers credentialing. You can get a degree there. You can get a vocation in lieu of getting a firefighter certification. But we're talking about local training that we give here on a daily basis. So what I want to do is bring Chief Langham up so he can talk briefly about the complications we have with doing this everyday training that basically enhances the skills of our firefighters so they can do what they need to do when they face a fire or any other incident.
All right, Chief, thanks.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's evening now. Good evening.
Good evening.
No, I'm sorry.
Evening.
What Chief Farmer is referring to, and to kind of address some of the concerns that Councilmember Clark had, this is not at all to replace the state-of-the-art facility that's up there at King. If you think about typical day-to-day firefighter training, addressing the needs, if a captain identifies that his crew has maybe not performed where they need to perform, and they need somewhere that they can quickly go to and do some modifications to the training that's going on. And when we go up to King, basically we look at it as 72 companies. There's 24 pieces of apparatus every day. So when we do a full-scale training, that's going to be 72 companies that have to rotate through King. That's 18 training days. To schedule that, as Chief mentioned, it's a full-scale facility up there. All the volunteer fire departments use it. The degree program uses it. The curriculum, or I'm sorry, the continuing education, the firefighter training up there for Forsyth Tech uses it. It takes us about 3 months to simply pull off one training session. So if you figure that, that's about, roughly we're able to go up there about 3 times a year per company, simply based on the scheduling that's going on. So the basic firefighter training that we need to do, the ventilation, the hose evolution, we have an in-house certification for our fire equipment operators, our driver operators, to teach them how to operate the truck. Those kind of things, it's difficult for us to simply drive up to King and do. So we're looking for something that is on a very much smaller scale. Some of the proposals that we put in front of you, we're talking about 2,800 square feet. So, you know, a nice size house is basically what we're talking about. And where they can go to do those trainings. Any questions about?
Any questions? We didn't know that the time that's like only so many times you're limited. That's good to hear that kind of information.
It's a scheduling issue, yes, ma'am.
In terms of the King location itself, I know that we shared in some costs with that, and the ongoing upkeep, whose facility is that?
That's Forsyth Tech's facility.
So it's Forsyth Tech's facility. And so with the arrangements in terms of when the city played a role in that, what were, I don't know, City Manager, you may be able to answer that, but the actual arrangement that the city had with that facility itself?
We have a joint operational agreement. The chief can speak to it in more detail, but it spells out the usage. We have the same joint, a similar joint operation agreement for the police law enforcement firing range. So it spells out when we can use it, how it's scheduled to be used. And as far as the maintenance, the county or Forsyth Tech pays for the operational costs up in King, and we pay for the operational costs at Liberty Street for the police training facility.
And what about the actual, the construction of that? Did we have dollars invested in the construction?
We shared the cost 50-50, the city and the county, for both facilities.
And we do use it extensively throughout our recruit training of our new hires and things of that sort. And we have 14 National Fire Protection Agency quick drills that we have to do annually. And if you figure those 72 companies going through that, basically, and a good example is just to look right next door to Guilford County. Guilford Tech also has a very similar state-of-the-art facility, but High Point has a very, a little bit smaller scale training center within their city. Same way with Greensboro, they have their own training center. Because when you talk about the needs, the mandatory hours, the OSHA mandated training that we're required to meet, it's just difficult to take care of that without having something on a smaller scale that we can go to. And again, it's also to address, hey, we've identified an issue that we need to improve on, that's where that company can go straight over to the training drill, and that supervisor can address that on spot to improve the service that we're providing.
And so, yeah, I understand that part. It's just trying to get a real wrap around it, because I think that the questioning that Councilmember Clark had, I think I had a bit of an issue trying to understand some of those questions too, because I did agree with him to an extent. If it's looked at as we're trying to duplicate that, I think that that's a hard sell in terms of trying to duplicate that same facility here when we have spent that cost here. And I think that taxpayers might not necessarily like the fact of that type of thing. But for us to look forward, I think I've supported pretty much everything that we've tried to do with our public safety from fire and police. The only thing I can think of right now is the helicopter was one. Right. And so I want to make sure you all have everything that you need so that you can perform the duties that you all need to perform. And so I just wanted to ask those questions so I could get a better understanding for the actual use and then the previous use at the actual King location itself.
Yeah, and in addition to that, Mr. Montgomery, we're in no way trying to replace what they have in King, because again, it has its place and its purpose for training and help addressing credentialing and everything else that our firefighters use it for. However, this local need, our firefighters are starving for an opportunity to do this training on a regular basis. It's one of their biggest griefs, and one of their biggest concerns is their ability to go address these things, so that when we actually have to execute at the point of an event or an activity or a fire event rather, they can practice those skills and be ready. And so you can imagine we have, like Chris said, all those companies, and each one wants to do the same thing in a day's time. And it says an hour event, and we have to travel 20-some miles from, or 20-plus miles from the Somerset location. You can see that 20-plus miles equates to about over an hour of travel time, and then those units are also out of the city. So we're talking about regular ongoing training that this small set of modules will help us basically to do on a regular basis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, maybe I missed it. I haven't heard anyone say how commendable it is to have thought out of the box to refurbish, reuse the fire ladder truck, to get those savings, to be in order to do this. I commend you on it. I believe that anytime you can't have enough training, I don't care what you do, whether it's a machine operator, a policeman, a fireman, a teacher, you just can't. And the job that public safety personnel do, I want you to be ready. You know, I want when my family, friends, community call you, I want you to have it like it's like second nature. You don't have to think about that I only had 1 hour of training and I got to remember everything. But if I'm a little bit, rusty or shaky or I'm not getting it, my supervisor, chief, or whatever can say, you know what, class, we need to take you guys back and we're going to run through this a couple of more times because I don't think you got it like you can get it. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a good thing that we got the module here and we could do it again. I commend you guys on the reuse refurbishment of that ladder truck, being able to get that savings to do that. That's what I'm talking about. I like that.
Well, thank you, and certainly, Councilmember Adams, those terms you use, rusty, and all those kinds of expressions of what actually happens is the reality of firefighting. Let's be frank and candid. We don't have fires every day like we did in the 70s, 60s through early 80s. And actually, we had so many fires during that era that we used the actual fires as training. We actually documented them as training. Well, now we have younger firefighters, less activity. It really takes more practice to make us ready, accountable, and certainly we want to have them in a place where they can be ready, because bottom line is confidence is huge in the fire service.
That's right.
And that's what this brings about.
Very good.
I watch Chicago too.
Very good. Chicago Fire.
Madam Chairman, if it's appropriate, I will say I thank you for what you do. We definitely appreciate what you do every day. I was at a restaurant yesterday and some good firemen, and I think it was the firewomen as well, came in and rescued a person from a restaurant. So we see every day what you do. We think it's necessary that you get the refurbished ladder truck. Thank you for the $500,000 in cost savings. And I think it's also necessary that we have the prefabricated training modules. So, Madam Chairman, with that being said, I move for approval.
It's been properly moved and second. Are there any questions? Yes.
The actual, the construction, the modular unit construction, I really like this type of construction. This is one, and our planning folk aren't in here, but there's been some innovative ways that individuals have used modular construction, particularly with this type of construction in residential uses. And we, if I'm not mistaken, there is some prohibitions within our housing code or something of that nature that may prohibit some of that for housing use. And if that's the case, that's something I would like for us to take a look at, because I think it offers opportunity when this is used in residential ways to offer residential use at a lower and more affordable cost for individuals. And so I think that it's a good method of construction.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion. Yes, you want?
Chief, I just thought about this, the youth build program. I don't know if these prefabricated buildings would go in line with what's been happening with the youth build program. And are you familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, maybe there could be some partnership here. Mr. City Manager, what do you think?
We could certainly check, see if maybe some of the work could be done by the youth build. It'd be a great training opportunity.
Training, right.
Right.
So we get 2 trainings for the price of 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. We do thank you. Thank you so much for your presentations. I did need to say this. Not long ago, we had Project We Care, and we had so many people to participate that it's getting too big for City Hall. And I want to commend all the people who have worked with it to make it from all of our different areas, and how these neighbors are partnering with us to make their city a more livable place as far as appearance, working together with new neighbors and neighbors who's been there. So that's just a plus. And also, Union Baptist Church celebrated 10 years with their drug program. They had 100 people, I saw it on TV, with their caps and their robes on, and had speakers. I recognized a couple of them, and they were talking about how good this is. So we talked about partnerships and tying in with the churches and what they do to lift this community, and that is something that I thought needed to be shared. And I thank you. Mr. City Manager, anything else? Yes, you're just gonna come on again, huh?
Come on, Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had to make one announcement. If I can do this without going to tears, Terry Carter, one of our assistant chief, will be working his last day here around the 27th of this month. He has been with the city for 31 years. In January, is that right, Chief? And so he's retiring. And so I just wanted to let you know that we'll be missing him, and he is getting ready to do his farewell.
And we didn't get a chance to do this, but earlier it was a new person out of the city secretary's office, and she left before we could. Would you tell us who's that?
Her name is Stephanie White Pinckney, and she is the new administrative council clerk in the city secretary's office.
All right, so we always like to introduce new people when they come. We'll get a chance to do that another time. And I declare, Mr. Carter, you used to play in my yard, didn't you? Yes, we appreciate your service. We appreciate that Carter family, with all the firemen that was in the Carter family. They love being firefighters. We appreciate that. Thank you. Any other comments, suggestions, or recommendations? If not, meeting stands adjourned. Mr. City